Welcome back to the Right Wave Audio community. My name is John, and for this video, we're going to take a look at some fairly recent, within the last year, lowest cost AV processors. And these specifically are the Emotiva BasX MC1 and the Tonewinner AT300. Now, we didn't cover these when they first came out, and the Tonewinner came out about May of last year, and then it was followed by the Emotiva model in December. We have been covering a lot of 8K HDMI 2.1 processors and receivers over the last few months, and there's been a lot of series that we've done on that. And we kind of set these aside because they don't have 8K and they're not HDMI 2.1 compatible. But I think this is going to be interesting to a lot of you who aren't maybe interested in HDMI 2.1. You're not seeking some of the higher price. We were doing McIntosh and Lyngdorf, and you could spend over $10,000 for those products. It might be refreshing to hear a video on the entry-level products. So here we go, and I think what I'd like to do here is start by just talking about the Emotiva history of entry-level processors, because these aren't common in the marketplace. Now, there was Outlaw Audio, who had an entry-level 7-channel basic processor. They don't seem to be having that any longer. So what remains, I think, are these two models, and particularly Emotiva's long history of this. And this started, what I understand to be around 2009 with Emotiva with the MC1. And at that time, that was a $700 unit, but it was a 7.1 or 8-channel processor. And then they followed that up with other models. It was the UMC 200, and that came out in 2014. Again, a 7.1 processor only, and that was actually $100 less thereabouts. So it was a $599 processor. And then a few years later, and I think it was because of all the HDMI changes and so forth, they came out with the MC700 only a few years later, a couple of years later in 2016. Again, a 7.1 processor. Well, now in 2021, just in the last few months, they come out with their BasX MC1, a few $100 more at $999. But they've also increased the channels. So let's take a look at what's going on here with Emotiva and Tonewinner. Now you might ask, why are we grouping these together? Well, there's a lot of similarities between the two. They're not exactly the same. But for those who have been following the audio industry, you might realize that there is an association, from a business relationship point of view, between Tonewinner, which is a Chinese-based OEM ODM company. They also make their own branded products, and Emotiva, who is based in Franklin, Tennessee, in the United States. What I understand is Tonewinner has produced in the past products for Emotiva in various degrees. Now, Emotiva has now manufacturing or assembly in their facility in Franklin under their Jade brand. So how these two are, still working today, it's unclear to me to the extent, but there is a relationship, and this will be evident as we go through this. So the Emotiva we mentioned have the BasX line. They've got a lot of products coming on this. I think it's a great series. They've been very successful with this because they're trying to target the most important thing, to increase the quality, to increase the listener's experience without spending a lot of money. So it's a high value line, the BasX line. And they've had a lot of amplifiers come out in the last year, and now they have the MC1 processor, which continues that line we talked about. This differs because while the others were a 7.1 or 8-channel processor, this is the first one in BasX that has increased now to 14 channels, or 13.1. And they did that in December of 2021. And this has been popular. We see it come out of stock and back in stock and out of stock again, just like a lot of brands out there. But we're glad to see this. But a few months before Emotiva had theirs, Tonewinner came out with their AT300. And the Hi-Fi Summit is one of the distributors in Canada that has the Tonewinner brand. I don't know if others are selling it in North America, but that's the one I know about. Now, they'll list their pricing there on their website, I think, at just under $1,400. So these are similarly priced within $100 US of each other, and they have the same channel count. They are 13.1, 14 channel units, and yeah, let's take a look even closer. Now, physically, they look similar size, although the Tonewinner looks a little taller in this picture. They both seem to have an antenna sticking up in the back. And when you flip these around, well, there's a little bit of a difference here. We can see clearly the Tonewinner has a balanced XLR for the outputs, whereas the Emotiva is doing RCA phono outputs. Now, they still have balanced XLR for up to two subwoofer outputs, and so that's the only place where Emotiva is using balanced XLR. These do look similar, but there are some differences. So when we get into the detailed comparison, we'll try to pick apart these a little bit further. I can see they both have removable power cords, but the Emotiva is using a little different form factor on how that connects versus the standard IEC power cord connector on the Tonewinner. And of course they have more, it's a little taller, so they have more space to do such thing. And if we look at these, now look at these kind of together, front and back, just they're similar, but they definitely look a little different. Taking the cover off, now I found an official photo from Emotiva on their website of the MC1. Pretty clean in there. It's really underutilized space. You see the power supply, you see the boards. It's pretty minimalist. It's really a small circuit board in here. I found through one of the forums this photo of Tonewinner, and it looks exactly the same, although the circuit board's a different color. And if we look at these closely, we can see Emotiva clearly marked on the PCB boards. You don't see that mark on the Tonewinner, so they're keeping it somewhat distinct there. But look, the layout looks exactly the same. I see the same chips used in both. Obviously, shared components, shared design, cooperation between these two companies in the hardware design here. It's very evident. Now, to really home in on how special these are at the $1,000 plus or minus price point, I wanted to look at the next tier up, and you have to go up to close to $3,000 or a little bit more to find the nearest AV processor to these models. There isn't a lot of AV processors out there on the market. So we come across the Marantz AV7706. So for Marantz, there's two of them. This is their entry-level processor separate. You can see this is bigger, more substantial chassis on the Marantz. It's a 13-channel unit. It has XLR balanced outputs on it, but it sells for $3,000. You also have the Emotiva XMC2, which is their entry level for the X series, and that sells, well, it was originally $2,999, but this year they did increase the price a little bit to $3,199. And this is a 16-channel processor. So you get a couple more channels with the Emotiva XMC2. Now I think others you might bring up come to mind, like the mono-price HTP1, which is hard to get right now. I think they're out of stock until the end of the year. But that's a little higher priced, a few $100s more. I think it's close to $4,000 on that. So let's just talk about the next tier up, which are these, I think only these two models that are just about $3,000. I think also the Anthem AVM70 is around $3,500, if that's still the price. So that would be also kind of getting in the running. But the differential between the basics and the AT300 and the next processors up is at least $2,000. I just wanted to stress that point. These are the only two processors you can get at the $1,000 price point. Pulling off the covers of the XMC2 and the 7706, you can see there's a lot more guts in those units. Now the XMC2, just a little disclosure here, I had to make a composite. I couldn't find a square-on shot. I did see this angled view, which is in the bottom left. That's the real photo. That's not mocked up or anything. But I did composite between an XMC1 and an RMC1L to kind of get what I think looks like inside the XMC2. But the point is, it's got a lot more guts than the MC1 or the AT300. Same thing with the AV7706. There's a lot more going on in that unit. So a little bit to justify that 2,000 plus adder on those products. So that's what you're getting for your money. Is there's definitely some hardware differences, but I think there's also some software differences. So let's do our normal breakdown of these processors. Now these don't have any amplification, any of these models. We're going to focus on the basic MC1 and the 300, but we're going to compare it to the next tier up. So with the MC1 and the AT300, it's really the same configuration choices on the speakers. You've got a 7.1.6 or a 9.4 1.4 configuration. Now, a lot of you say, well, they advertise all these extra subwoofer channels. The Emotiva says, oh, you can plug in 2 subwoofers, and the Tonewinner says, well, we can have up to 3 subwoofers plugged in. Read the manuals. These are not independently controlled. These are in parallel, single output, no flexibility, unlike the XMC2, which you can have independent control of those subwoofers, up to 3 of them, and on the Marantz, up to 2 independent controls. So those are truly 2 and 3 output subwoofer models, and we only give credit where credit is due. So yes, you have a choice of front wides or another set of heights. But what's particularly interesting here, you get front wides. Not many products have front wides. Not many processors or receivers have the capability of doing front wides. And I think if you have a wide enough room, I think I would rather go with the front wides than the third set of height speakers. That's just my personal opinion. Now, when you get into the Emotiva XMC2, you don't have to do as many trade-offs there, albeit it's a harder decision to go to 6 on the ceiling, because I think I would at least want dual subs independently controlled, and then I have to give up on that third set of heights. So it's a trade-off between the extra subwoofers and that third set of heights. The Marantz is pretty straightforward. It's a 7.2.4, and whether you utilize them or not, that's what's always available. As far as the format support, they're all Dolby Atmos capable, they're all DTS:X capable, but none of them have DTS:X Pro. The only one that supports Aural 3D in this set is the AV7706. So you're not going to get Aural 3D at a $1,000 price point. What's really interesting about these entry-level models is there's no Ethernet and there's no Wi-Fi, so you're not going to do any streaming on these devices. It does have Bluetooth, so you could stream from your phone. There's a Bluetooth input, but there's not a Bluetooth output to a speaker. But that's not so common, albeit the Marantz does have a Bluetooth output, so you can go to headphones, etc. There's no FM AM tuner on these, but you do get it on that higher price model. So you can see where they strip some things down because this is the basics line, or this is the entry-level line for Tonewinner. You still get an RS-232 port, which isn't present on the XMC2, by the way. You do get it on the AV7706. So a lot going on that is common here. You're not getting headphone jacks on these entry-level models. So there are some trade-offs. Looking at the format support, there's no IMAX Enhance. I don't think in any Emotiva product as of yet. Hopefully they're working on that. But they don't have it on these basic units, and you don't have it on the Tonewinner. There is Dolby Vision support through all these models. When it comes to room calibration, now everybody thinks of Dirac being kind of one of the better room calibration systems, and that's what's in the XMC2. The Odyssey room correction calibration is what Marantz has always been using, and it's regarded as a tier below Dirac, but definitely below both of those are EmoQ and the Tonewinner. These are really basic. I mean, I would barely call these room calibration. There's a kind of advanced tools that are beyond equalization. So there's not a lot of literature on these, not a lot I could find. So word on the street is those are nothing special. There's no THX certification on these, as was to be expected. What are we learning about the DACs on this? Now, there's been a lot of shuffle as of late because the availability of AKM chips, because of the fire, and they're still recovering from that with the AKM factory fire. As far as I know, the XMC2 is still using the AK4490 chip, and the Marantz 7706 is using an AK4458 chip, which gives pretty good output specifications on just the chip alone. I did find, and it's probably 80% confirmed on Tonewinner, having a Cirrus Logic chip, the CS42528 chip. Now that doesn't seem to be at the same caliber as the AKM that the other two uses. In fact, what I found was it's 24-bit versus a 32 on the chip, and its signal to noise is 114 versus the other being higher. THD, it's similar to what this is 100 100, not quite as good on the THD plus N. PCM is only 192 kilohertz. The others go higher. There's no mention of DSD support with the Cirrus Logic chip. Furthermore, Emotiva's never been too much to publish on their specifications. You do get some signal to noise. They don't publish for every product, a little inconsistent. They do publish for the MC1 that the signal to noise is 100 dB, and the THD is 0.05%. Now, if I look at the specifications for Tonewinner, they're saying they're only specifying those for the direct output, the analog direct output. So when it's running through all the digital circuitry, that's unknown. So if you look at for the analog output, they're saying it's 98 dBs direct at 0.02% THD. So these are just a kind of a guide. You really need an independent group to really equalize these outputs. But I just wanted to show you that there's probably a difference in DAC quality between these entry levels and the upper tier. Now let's take a look at the I/O. And these all have a pretty sizable HDMI ports. I mean, these entry-level ones have 6 in and 2 out. The Marantz does have 7 in and 3 out, and the XMC has 8 in, which is, I don't think anything else does 8 in versus 2 out, or at least another brand. That's a high point count for HDMI. eArc, this I believe is the MC1 is the first Emotiva product to have eArc. None of the other ones support it. They're all still on ARC, and even their flagship RMC1. We're hoping for some changes there in the future. They're giving you coax and optical inputs, 2 and 2, no outputs. If you want outputs, you do go to the XMC2. They give you some outputs, although Marantz isn't putting that output as we see things going more to HDMI going forward. No AES EBU. You got to go to the XMC2 there. That's a little special. Denon and Marantz aren't using that type of interface. For pre-inputs, the MC1 is a little different than a Tonewinner here. It's only giving the 2 subwoofer outputs. Now they'll do it it's balanced. They're only doing 2 subwoofer outputs as balanced. Whereas the Tonewinner will give you the full 13.1 channels as balanced. And so there's a big difference there. Emotiva is giving that as unbalanced RCA connections on the outputs. Now Tonewinner also has a 5.1 input for multi-channel, and I think that's good to have. Now Marantz also gives that as a 7.1 input, and the XMC2 isn't doing any multi-channel inputs. So if you want multi-channel, you got to bring that in through HDMI or through USB on an Emotiva product. There's still some analog, a good healthy amount, 4 and 4 analog inputs versus 6 on the Marantz and 3 on the XMC2. In fact, a little better than the XMC2 on the analog inputs. No legacy video, and that's not something that really hits most customers nowadays. There's a few out there. There's no phono inputs on any of these models except for the Marantz, and you still get some triggers. Now with the entry level, you only get a single trigger, so you know you're going to do some daisy chain there if you want to bring in multiple amps, etc. And there's an infrared port. Now I do want to point out that on the AT300 from Tonewinner, 3 of the inputs are shared. So that's where you get the 5.1 from, or you'd have them as 3 additional stereo analog inputs. So that's all based on how you configure the unit. So you either get 1 analog input plus a 5.1, or a total of 4 analog inputs. So those are your choices there. Looking deeper into the HDMI, as I said, these are all 4K except for the AV7706. And so Marantz was early to market with the 7706 having 2.1 HDMI support. But you only get that on one output unless you use an adapter box. So we're hoping that Marantz will correct for that later this year, maybe with an updated model throughout their line. But you get the 4K 120 and the 8K 60 with the Marantz, but you're not going to get any 8K capable product at this $1,000 price point unless you go to a receiver. The MC1 does advertise both HDR10 and HDR10 Plus. Tonewinner only seems to be advertising HDR10, which I'm suspicious that the software might be slightly different between the Emotiva and the Tonewinner product. Obviously, not being a HDMI 2.1 product, you don't get all the VRR and auto low latency modes, etc. And this is still on HDCP 2.2, and you're only going to get 2.3 on the copy protection for the Marantz. They all got Dolby Vision, as we said before. IMAX Enhance, you're only going to get on the Marantz. And hybrid log gamma is as well on the Marantz. And no, they don't seem to be publishing whether this a product has Rec 2020 or not, but most of them do. So we're just leave that as a question mark. Looking at the networking, as said before, no Ethernet, no Wi-Fi, only Bluetooth on these entry-level products. Marantz checks a lot of boxes here. Even the XMC2 from Emotiva is just Ethernet. Really, Emotiva has not got into wireless natively on board. They have offered Bluetooth dongles that can plug in to work with your phones, etc. But it doesn't seem to be supported on these models. Likewise, because you don't have all the Ethernet and streaming support, you're not going to have control through all the voice formats. You've got some basic control through infrared and the RS-232 port and the triggers, but nothing through Ethernet, and they do not list any control for Savant, etc., Crestron, as Marantz really just checks all the boxes right down the line for voice and integration support. So, and even on their flagships, Emotiva really doesn't highlight this in their documentation. As suspected, when we get into streaming ecosystems, you're not having any support from Emotiva or Tonewinner. If that's really what you need, you've got to go to the Marantz processor or some receiver that's out there in the world. And this gets easy as we go along here, because without those others supported, you're not going to have your internet streaming services as well. So even at that, the Marantz is not listing those specifically. Now, on remotes, Emotiva's got a new remote, and I think this is a welcome sight, because I didn't hear a lot of love from the remotes that Emotiva has been supplying with their X series and through probably about the last decade. So they're giving it a try with a new redesign. This one, they say, is illuminated or backlit, so like you'd get on the Marantz. It's unclear if the Tonewinner is backlit, because they don't really talk about it in their manual, although I got this drawing from the manual that points out what the buttons do. Doesn't point out if there's a backlight. As far as dimensions and weight, obviously the entry-level ones are the smallest of the lot. These are pretty thin heights. The Tonewinner is a little taller, as we mentioned before, so that's going to be, almost an inch taller or about 20 millimeters taller on those. The Tonewinner is not quite as deep as the MC1. These are all coming in, definitely under 20 pounds. 10 kilograms. It's like the what you'd normally see in a processor. These are really light, and you could tell by the boards that they would be light. They don't have big power supplies in them, etc. The Tonewinner is a 50-watt power consumption. It's unknown. Emotiva doesn't publish their power consumption all the time. So the Tonewinner is 4.3 pounds or 6.5 kilograms. And the MC1 is 10 pounds, 4.5 kilograms. So these are pretty light as far as processors go. So not just the cheapest, the lightest. Looking at the user interfaces, and starting with the one right on the front of the product, these are all of them side by side. I'll just let you look at these. I mean, they're all quite a little different. The knobs are in different places, and how you navigate them are different. And they all seem to be using kind of like a dot matrix display, not anything real modern, like a touchscreen or color, as we're starting to see in some products. But none of these have that advance of a user interface on the front panel. looking at the menus, really basic here. You know, if you want nice, clean menus, Marantz on these entry-level processors, that's going to give you best bet. Tonewinner, I probably leaves the most to be desired, where the font is not real crisp and clean there, and the icons look a little dated. As basic as Emotiva is, at least it is on the cleaner side. That's all I'll say there. But not going to win any awards for the UI on those products. And I also like how, you know, Marantz does the speakers, and it's all graphical and everything. So, you know, nothing of that quality. When it comes to the room calibration, I cannot find for the life of me a screenshot of EmoQ. I'm not expecting much there. The manuals do not have screenshots. I don't see anything on forums posted right now. So internet searches are coming up dry, but I did find something for Tonewinner, which is on this slide. Again, this looks something that's like raw test equipment. It doesn't look like a residential home electronics quality. You know, the Dirac that goes into the XMC2, yeah, that Dirac's done a nice job with the user interface, and so does Odyssey with what they put into the Marantz. So those are all the calibrations, just kind of a look and feel type of view. That kind of subs it all up for all these two entry-level processors, the only ones I know at the $1,000 price point. Otherwise, you're going up to $3,000. You know, what do you think? I think these have merit in this day and age, given the uncertainty of, you know, the HDMI 2.1 chips. For those who want to get into separate, start investing. Rather than put your money into processors, maybe you want to put your money into your amplifiers, into your speakers. Get all that good. And with all this stuff swirling around about HDMI 2.1 and getting it stable and good and everything, wait for that to shake out. In the meantime, you could buy one of these $1,000 units and feel like you haven't overspent. Now, what I'd like to know from you is, would you take this route or would you go the receiver route? Now, a lot of these receivers are now having good pass-throughs. So you can start with the built-in amplifiers and then go to external amplifiers in varying degrees depending on make and model. So that wraps it up for this. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to this Ripewave Audio community. And be sure to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when the next video is published. Until then, keep evolving your audio experience.